Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank Chairman Ryan and our ranking member Van Hollen for the warm welcome and look forward to serving on this committee. And thank you, Dr. Elmendorf. I think I have not heard from an economist or read the thinking of an economist who has not said that we have to approach this serious economic challenge by a balance of reducing spending and generating new revenues. And I think there's really no question that the President's articulation of that model is something that we have to do so that we both do it in a way that's properly timed, but also which is at the same time making the investments that are necessary to grow our economy. But clearly we have to reduce spending, and so we're going to have to make choices about what we invest in. And so I'm wondering if you would share some thoughts with us in terms of getting the most bang for our buck. What are the kinds of policies that when we are engaging in spending, we are likely to produce the greatest economic growth and the greatest help to our economy, because not all spending is the same. And so in that regard in particular, I'm interested to know your thoughts about infrastructure spending, really rebuilding the crumbling infrastructure of our country in sort of the old-fashioned WPA way, which leaves behind an asset which contributes to economic growth and our ability to move goods and services and information to compete in the global economy, and at the same time puts people to work immediately, but leaves behind a valuable asset. How does infrastructure in particular relate to economic growth and when we're making choices about how to do spending? And secondly, if you would speak to a proposal the President spoke about last night, which is a proposal to allow millions of American homeowners to refinance their homes at a lower interest rate, the market rates today, which I suspect, not being an economist, would produce on average, I think they said $1,200 a year in new spending opportunities for families, provide substantial economic relief, help stabilize the housing market, but I also expect it would be a huge economic generator in terms of job creation. So if you could speak to those two issues.
Yes, Congressman. So when we talk about bang for the buck, sometimes we talk about that in a short-term context and sometimes in a medium or long-term context, and the answers can be different. In the short term, what matters most is how much of the extra dollar of government spending or how much of the lost dollar of taxes is spent and how quickly it's spent. Giving more money through spending tax cuts to lower-income people tends to be more effective than doing the same for higher-income people because they tend to spend a larger share of the difference. In infrastructure spending, a lot of that gets spent, but depending on the project, it may get spent somewhat slowly. So in that sense, infrastructure can have a high bang for the buck ultimately, but it may not have as large a bang for the buck right now, because certain projects just take a while to get started on. In the medium term and long term, infrastructure investment, if devoted to high return projects, can in fact have a big effect on the state of the economy. About half of non-defense discretionary spending can be viewed as investment, either in physical structures or in people in the form of education and training. Not all that money is spent well, but some of it is clearly spent for things that the private sector would not otherwise provide. And some of those projects then can have high rates of return and can boost the economy in significant ways over time. I think the one concern that people have raised about the cutbacks in discretionary spending as a share of GDP that are in place under the sequester, but even under the original caps, people have expressed concern that that can end up limiting the investment the federal government does. Of course, it's hard to know for sure because you and your colleagues haven't made those specific choices yet. On changing, helping households to refinance in the way the President discussed last night, I don't know precisely what his proposal is. We'll see that when he releases his budget. But we have in the past done analysis of different ways of encouraging more refinancing. We think that can have a positive effect on the economy. In addition to helping those households, the overall effect depends crucially on how many households end up refinancing. So it depends crucially on how a program is designed, who is eligible, what the incentives are to households and to the lenders to do something differently than they're doing under current law. So the effects in aggregate can vary a lot across different ways of doing that. But dollar for dollar, it can be effective, as we reported in a report about a year or so ago.
When you say it depends on the amount, obviously the more Americans who are able to take advantage of it, if it's an easy program to administer lots of eligible Americans, it will have a greater and more positive impact.
Yes, exactly, Congressman.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gentlelady from Tennessee.